to Gotta Be Me podcast. We're so happy to be here again with you this evening. We're your hosts. My name is Sophia Benyon. This is my cousin, Peyton Benyon.
Welcome back to our channel, everybody. If you are new here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I always feel like I'm about to laugh on that part.
Why?
Because you're always making jokes.
I don't make jokes.
Yes, and I'm always laughing.
Whatever.
Keep going.
We are so excited today because we have extra and extremely special guests with us today. And that is our...
He's making faces.
He's always making faces. That is our paternal grandparents, so our dad's parents. So we're so happy to have them. We're so privileged. They came and stayed at our house for the holidays, and we were like, we gotta get you on the show. And I feel like, especially as elderly people, old people.
We're not afraid of that word.
They have so much wisdom and advice that they could share with us and give with us. And yes, they're young at heart as well. Even though they're up in years, they're young at heart. And that just gives them such a path for communicating with younger generations and bridging that generational gap. So we're so excited for what we're going to talk about today. So let's get right into, I guess, a little bit of history we should talk about. I'll ask you first, Grandpa Senior, where were you raised? Were you raised in, where were you raised, and was it a racially diverse area, or was it mainly black people or mainly white people?
Okay, I was raised in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago. As you all know, Chicago was kind of set up in quadrants, south side, west side, north side. I was on the west side, and it was all black.
All black where you
All
were?
black, yeah. Although the schools I went to, I grew up going to a Catholic school, so the schools I went to, my grammar school was all black, but my high school was mixed.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the high school I graduated from was predominantly all white.
Oh, that's interesting. So in elementary school, it was like, oh, it was all black.
All black.
But then
Was
when
it
you
even
got
like all the teachers were all black?
Going to Catholic school, they were nuns, and all the nuns were white.
so all the students were black and all the teachers were white?
Yes.
That's really interesting.
Well, there wasn't a lot of black nuns going in, and I don't know how many black nuns there are right now either.
I have seen
Except
some.
for Whoopi Goldberg.
Stop.
Yeah.
She doesn't count.
She wasn't a nun.
How about you, Grandma?
I grew up on the south side of Chicago.
Okay.
The
And-
Ritchie area.
Not ritzy.
Ritzy area.
Well, it was all bougie
And,
over there.
we see how it was.
If you notice, grandma's proper. I'm more.
I went to school on the south side as well. And predominantly all black schools. But our neighborhood did have some diversity, and even our family was somewhat diverse. We had an aunt who was from France. My uncle met her during World War II, brought her back here, and there are others, in that same kind of setup or situation.
So what year were you all born?
I was born 1953,
Yeah, we were both born there.
a little while ago.
They're old.
What?
So, nothing. I was talking to the camera.
Okay, well, watch yourself.
Yes, sir. So, integration happened while you all were in school. Do you remember that? Was that you're in the north, you're in Chicago, so was that a thing there as well?
Okay, for me, the real integration was when I was in high school, where they started doing the busing.
Okay.
And the high school that I went to, there was a grammar school there and a girls' Catholic high school there. And they would take some inner city children and bus them out there to start
To try to get that.
I went there because I was playing football. And so one of my coaches went there and I was following him. But then I found out as a way to get to school, because it was quite a bit of ways, there was a bus that I could take to go out there. Other than that, I was paying my way to go out there all the time. So that's when my involvement with it at that point.
How about you, Grandma?
Well, I believe the desegregation laws were passed in 62, 63, somewhere around that time. And I finished the 8th grade in 1967. And just before our graduation, if you will, time, one of the school administrators came in and said, okay, now you can go to any school that you want to in the city. And pretty much our entire class was like, what? I don't want to go over there.
Are you
And
serious?
they don't want me over there.
Like, you all knew it.
Yeah,
Like,
then
why are we
don't
doing
want
this?
they don't want to be at our school. We don't want to be at their school. And so the high school I went to was originally in an all-white neighborhood I would say probably 85 to 90% white students.
So how did that happen? Like, why did you go there?
Well, looking back, what I realized is that they systematically graduated all of those students out, because by the time I came, it was probably more like a 60-40, 60 white, 60.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sorry, 40 white, 60
black. So
black.
it was
And
taken
so
over.
my class, the class of 500, there were probably, I think there was a girl from Hawaii, there was an Asian girl, maybe a white male. And I think that was
Are
it.
you
Yeah.
serious?
Yeah. So I think it was a very systematic thing that they did to
It's
work
really
that out.
interesting.
And that neighborhood has completely changed.
Did you ever feel that you can remember as like a child and young person and even young adult, did you feel a lot of or any racial tension in your neighborhood or school area?
I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. Well, first of all, because my grandmother was white, which I didn't realize she was white until I got up older.
You didn't even think about it?
No,
Why didn't you know she was white?
She was grandma.
Did she say
So,
she wasn't?
No, in my mind, she was just grandma, and that's all it was. Although sometimes she used to profess to be a light-skinned black person, but she wasn't. She was purely white.
That's
Oh
funny
yeah,
that
she
she
was.
said that.
Maggie Lee,
The
and
Irish lady.
really mixed. And so I was kind of naive to it, and so I was young and enjoying life and just having fun. So a lot of those things that most people experience, that kind of went over my head because I didn't. It wasn't.
You weren't thinking about it?
No, I wasn't thinking about it. I was just being happy and having fun.
So do you remember your first awakening to it?
Yes, I would say I was in grammar school still. I hadn't gotten to high school yet. And where we lived on the west side of Chicago, there was a boundary line going further west, which was around Cicero Avenue, where it was predominantly all white, pretty much all white. And you really, as black people, weren't to really go in that area.
Okay.
My uncle and auntie who raised me used to send us to the movies a lot, and I remember experience me, my older brother, and my sister, a year younger than me, went to this movie. And as we were leaving the movie, we were walking down the street to come home, and across the street there was a group of white boys walking. And my older brother, Jerome, said to me, he said, and my sister said, when I tell you to run, run. And we was like, what? But we kind of saw them, but so her and I, of course, were scared, and he was trying to protect us and take care of us. And so he said, run. And so we just broke off and started running. And I stopped after we got further along, noticed he wasn't running with us. And I turned around and looked, and I saw these white boys all gather around him, and then they hit him a couple of times, and then they let him go. So that was kind of like my real first experience with something like
must
that.
have been so
But he was
scary.
trying to protect me, so he pushed us away,
So that was when you first started like kind of thinking about
realizing that more and more it was there.
there's a problem here.
But actually, growing up, really, I was more afraid in going in other black neighborhoods than I was going in the white neighborhoods.
Really?
Yeah, because if you didn't grow up in that neighborhood, you in another neighborhood, you're going to another gang territory. And where I lived, it was gang infested. So if you went in another gang territory, you're subject to get.
So it was a rough area.
I mean, I've had experiences with that more than I had with negative issues with white people.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
How about you, Grandma?
Chicago's so segregated like that.
My parents, I think, worked hard to try to shield us or protect us from some of that. But we're old enough, I don't know about you, husband, but I remember being a little colored girl, a Negro girl,
Really?
a black girl,
That's crazy.
and an
Negro,
African American
you
woman.
don't say Negro, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that was.
I remember you
that
told
was
me
who we
one
were.
time that when you were a little girl, you were down south, you used to see the signs on the water fountain that said colors only. I might have made that up in my head.
I don't remember actually seeing the signs, but when we visited my great grandmother, which was in Selma, which was one of the hotbeds of the civil rights movement, Selma, Alabama, she would coach us before she would take us anywhere. Make sure you don't look any white people in the face. Keep your head down. If they ask you a question, say yes, ma'am, or yes, sir.
that brings history so much closer.
Yeah, that's like what I read in a book.
Yeah.
I read about that one time.
It was real. It was real. And she actually had the experience of, she went to register to vote, when that law was passed. So she went to register to vote. And the local sheriff said, her name was Candace. He said, Candace, what you doing down here? She said, I came to register to vote. He said, you get on home. So she left and went home, but she can't. I heard she went back later.
She went
And
back
she
later.
registered to
She
vote.
registered
Yeah,
to vote.
she registered to vote. So we were not totally unaware, but yet I think, within our family, my father just tried to shield us children, and he was very careful about whether or not we would take trips down there or not. And in fact, he didn't go down there until my great-grandmother died, and that was in the 70s.
Really? So do you kind of remember your first awakening to it at all? Or what kind of made you be like, oh?
Well, I think going into high school, that was a big thing. And of course, there were riots all across Chicago. Martin Luther King came to Chicago. So we were aware of lots of those things happening, the protests and so forth. I said we had, relatives that were white. We had, we lived in what's called a 3-flat apartment, so 3 floors. And on the 3rd floor, there was a white family. It was an older woman and her 2 adult children. And, they were just there in the neighborhood, part of the neighborhood when we moved there. So I think I really was even more aware, though, going into the high school and young adult years, because we lived in a farm university town.
Okay.
So
That kind of
it's a little more stand out there.
Do you all have like any memories of stories your parents told of, I don't know, experiences they had with racism or prejudice or anything like that?
No, I don't have any direct stories. And of course, I didn't grow up with my parents. I
Right.
grew up with my uncle and auntie. But I would say I had an experience of his experiences, because when he would take us out to go to the drive-in theater, which again was in Cicero, he would instruct us that we weren't to get out the car and go to the bathroom unless we went 2 together. And we would always make our own popcorn, so we wouldn't have to buy anything at the concession stand. And the one thing that I didn't realize right away is my uncle would always give us something hard in a coat and say, take this and put it in the car. And at first,
You didn't think anything of it?
No, they're just, okay, he's telling us to take them, so we take and put it in the car. Then I realized at one point it was a lead pipe wrapped up in newspaper. Then he put it in his coat. Then later on, it was a machete they would give us.
Just in case.
And just in case. At that time, when it was going on, he said, take and put it in the car. I put it in the car and got in the car, and I enjoyed the movie. As I got up older, I realized why he was doing it.
He was trying to watch out for everybody. Yeah. How about you, Grandma?
My mother and her family came up from Selma when she was a little girl. They went to bed at night. I asked, kind of like, how did you end up coming to Chicago? And I know there was the Great Migration. A lot of black people moved to the northern states in hopes of better employment, better living conditions. And so anyway, she said they woke them up at night, put them in the car, she and her brother, and, gave them the, no noise, be quiet. And they drove out of town in the dark, which was like, why would they do that? And they drove and drove and drove until they, got to a safe area. And recently I asked my eldest brother, so is that right? And he said, yeah, that's right. I said, well, what was the deal? He said, a white man had lent him money to buy his car.
Lent
my grandfather
father.
Money to buy his car. So he didn't want him to know he was leaving. So he just took off in the dark. And then my brother said, and then later the man came and found him and took the car.
Are you
took
serious?
The car. And then on my father's side, his oldest brother, he had a brother that was 20 years older than he was. So he came to Chicago first. And I thought, again, it was for opportunities, but rather it was because he got into a fight and he hit a white man.
Are you serious? He fled.
And they said, the best place for this man is up north. Y'all better get him out of here right now.
That's crazy.
And so he went to Chicago.
That's kind of how the family
ended up in Chicago.
In the Chicago
yes,
area.
ma'am.
That's two
Both
good
sides.
stories.
Right there.
One or the other.
So when you raised your 3 sons, our fathers, do you feel like you had pretty much, you feel like did you feel like at the time, I should say, that the world had kind of gotten better than how it was for you all growing up as far as racial tensions? Did you feel like they were less?
More opportunities.
I mean, we met in college, and so after we got married, we stayed in the college town, and our boys went to predominantly all-white school because there wasn't that many blacks that actually lived in DeKalb, Illinois. But I felt there was opportunities. Again, I at that time I didn't feel like I was being held back from anything. I thought that opportunities were there if I worked and earned my way to get those opportunities. But I don't think I didn't feel like anybody was standing in my way at the time. So therefore, I didn't feel anybody was standing in their way. And matter of fact, some of the friends that our boys met, their parents became kind of like our friends. And I felt we had a good relationship with them. Even one of them was the one that helped us get our first home. And he supported us and helped us to get that first home. So I didn't feel like that they were being held back. I felt like they had much more opportunity than we did.
How about the area you raised in? Do you feel like it was, I mean, I'm sure you purposely tried to pick an area that was better than...
Well, growing up in Chicago and growing up in a gang-infested area, one of the things I told my wife is I do not want to move back to Chicago and take my sons back there. I don't want them to have to experience gang life or be, if you will, recruited to get in a gang. So growing up as little boys, they were enjoying themselves. I remember the first day your father came home and said to me, "Dad, I want to play soccer." I was shocked. Because I grew up football, basketball, you know, black people, this is what we played. What are you talking about, soccer? What is this? But it turned from that to, we got heavily involved with it, and I, fell in love with soccer myself.
Coach, right?
I was a coach, a referee.
That is funny.
I was all involved in it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Soccer.
And I said soccer, but yeah, it was good. So they met, I think, the community, I felt accepted us. Not that I was looking at it, would they accept us, but I felt they accepted us and helped us with the boys, and I thought we had good camaraderie. The only one negative experience I feel that we had was when your father was in first grade or whatever at the Catholic school.
Oh, kindergarten.
Kindergarten in the Catholic school, and at the end of the year, we went to go get the school review, and Miss Teacher was saying, well, he kind of does okay, but he doesn't read so good, and we were shocked. We're like, and I think your grandma was like, what? What are you talking about? He could read? No, he can't. And he was there. We said, come here. And we had him sit down and read in front of him.
Actually, she had him.
Oh, she had him.
Read. Yeah. She said,
she was
she wanted to
shocked.
show us.
She was shocked that he could read. And I think she just felt like, this little black boy that can't. At the time, I kind of thought that later, but I like.
You got that feeling from her that she was like.
Yeah, I said, wait a minute, my son can read. What are you talking about? My son's smart.
My son is smart.
What are you talking about? My boy.
He can definitely read. Grandpa, you were a part of a fraternity. Can you say on camera is it a secret what fraternity you're a part of?
Yes, I belong to Kappa Alpha Psi.
Do you feel like that helped keep you out of trouble in your college years? Or got you into trouble, or did it affect you?
It affected me all right. Yeah, it did. It did all of that.
It did both.
Yeah,
there
got me in trouble, kept me out of trouble. Yeah, but I got it.
I got football too.
Yeah, football really is what probably helped protect me from being in more trouble.
Really?
I was in trouble, but yeah, football kind of helped some too. A lot.
Hey, you got yourself together though.
It took a while.
So how long have y'all been married?
50 years.
That deserves a round of applause for everyone everywhere.
That is grand.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
You spent more than double your lives together than apart. What would you tell, I've been wanting to ask y'all this question now. What would you tell our viewers, what's your secret? How did you manage it? How, 50 years? That's 3 of my lifetimes, or no, 2 of my lifetimes.
No,
How'd you do it? What would you say is your secret?
First of all, there was a lot of hard times, and there was a lot of struggles. Because we got married young.
How old were you when you got married?
19.
That's really young.
And technically we weren't ready to be married, especially me. I really wasn't ready to be married. But I've always been a person that wants to complete what they've done. And so I didn't want to give up. There were times that I felt like giving up. But then I realized something hit me and said, I can't live without her. I have to have her in my life, even if I still cause her pain and headache and have these struggles. I still need to have her around me some way, somehow. I used to always say to her, sometimes we'd be in a room together and she wanted to talk and I'm a big talker. I said, I don't need you to talk to me. I just need you to be in the room. Your presence is enough to satisfy me.
That's so
But
sweet.
it was a determination to say, we're just not going to give up and we're not going to quit. And this is before salvation. Then after salvation, then it got a lot better, a lot easier.
Do you feel like once you really committed your life to God and became a Christian, it made a big difference?
Yeah, it was a leap, major leap.
Really?
Yeah, better understanding, better realization. I truly understood. I mean, I cared about your grandmother. I loved her in some kind of way. I can't explain how. But after salvation, I understood how.
What
And
love
was why,
really, what it meant and everything.
Yeah, before I didn't. It was more of a love like. But afterwards, it became really love.
Yeah. What would you say, Grandma?
50 years, huh?
50 years.
It does take work. It's not just a walk in the park, a little picnic. It's not roses and flowers and chocolate. It's not all of that.
At least not all the time, right?
That's right, not all the time. Some of the time, but it takes work. It takes commitment. It takes having a willingness to not just bail out just because things get a little bit hard. And I think that's one of the main differences that we see today is that young people just say, okay, it's not working. I don't like it. I'm out of here. I'm a person who I can work on things like projects. Okay, I can work over projects over a period of time.
You keep coming back to it.
Yeah, and see it to the end. And I think it takes that. I'm not saying marriage is a project, but
Kind of is, though, right?
it
Gotta work
kind
on
of
it.
is.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, there are constant steps that you have to take to move up and move through the battles, the trials, the children, going from, like you said, we were 19, from that into middle age to older age. It does take a lot of work. It takes being able to communicate.
The other thing too to realize is that even though we both grew up in Chicago, we actually grew up in different cultures in Chicago.
Right.
I was on the west side, which was a different culture than what your grandmother grew up on the south side. I grew up really as an adopted type of child with my uncle and auntie, so I didn't have mom and daddy. Your grandmother had that, so when we met, she had that stability coming to support her, whereas mine wasn't as stable. Although my uncle and auntie tried to make it stable for me, but they weren't mom and daddy, and I
Right.
knew
They
that.
couldn't
So
take their place
it just
like
wasn't there.
Right.
And one of the things I've realized as I've gotten older, because I've gotten to know my father, my natural father, and I've realized that some of the things that I do that is about me is natural in me because it's in him.
You got that connection.
After talking to him and hearing some of the things he's done and how he is and his characters, I realized, oh, that's why I'm like that, or that's why I do that, because it's naturally in me to be like that, like he is. Whereas there are some things that I do that I learned from being with my uncle and auntie,
Right.
that they train me up. And I mean, like education, that was major with them. It was important to my father, but it was major with them. And so my uncle made sure we had that base of education. So that was part of what I grew up with, which was a little bit different than what your grandmother. And my family was big partiers. To this day, they're big partiers. So party was very important in our family, whereas grandma's family was more churchgoers.
Yeah.
And so, you brought these two together. It was like,
We had family gatherings, but not
It wasn't a party like
no,
that.
ours
party.
was-
They
ours-
they party.
Y'all probably
Ours
sang
was-
at
You
your
all sang. That's what y'all did, huh?
We sang,
Ours
we
was-
laughed, we talked,
pull out the music and dance,
But we had
drink and everything else.
in our home, like my grandparents lived with us until they died, both sets of grandparents. My dad was the youngest one in his family. I said earlier he had a brother 20 years older. Well, their father died when my father was a little boy.
Okay.
And so he and his brothers got together and said, oh, please, Mom, don't ever get married again. Don't bring another man to our house. We'll take care of you forever. So he was the last one at home. And so when he asked my mother to marry him, he said, okay, my mother has to have a place to live. And that was very common back during those days. So my mother said yes. She lived with us until she died. After she died, her parents moved in and lived with us until each of them died.
So it was just more low key at your house in general.
Yeah, but I mean,
Did
in
Grandpa have
terms
to
of
teach you how to dance?
No, I knew how to dance.
You knew how to
I knew how to dance. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew how to dance. Right. Now that so we had the stability. We knew about or understood the family unit and how it should work together and that kind of thing. So, like Grandpa said, we came in from two different perspectives.
And when you got married, you had to make that work, right?
Yeah, and that's hard. That is hard.
That takes time.
It's important to, kind of make sure you're not getting yourself into a bed you don't want to sleep in.
Yeah.
So to speak.
For real, right?
Yeah.
I feel like more than anything, maybe I shouldn't say more than anything, but I feel like one of the biggest things that the youth need today, young people our age, people of our generation, is a connection to older people, is a connection to their history, who they are, where they come from. And I feel like so many problems of our generation could be fixed simply by a good connection to the people from your generation. And if Peyton has any more questions, I hope she mentions them. But my last question for tonight is how would you advise us to go forward? What would you say is the best way? What can we do? What can you do to bridge that gap? And what is your advice? If you could give, one short piece of advice to the youth of today, what would you say?
I feel like too many young people today don't want to listen. They
That's right.
already feel like they know more than you know. I give the example of Leo at the mission. I'll be talking to him and trying to tell him something. This is an 11-year-old boy, but he'll tell me that I'm wrong. And I say, Leo, I've been living for 70 years. How are you going to tell me that I'm wrong? I know I'm more. I've forgotten more than you know. And so, but he'll still try to tell me. So I think one of the problems is society has allowed our youth to feel like they know more than those over them or older them know.
We live in the age of Google, so we
Right.
think we know because we can just Google.
We have
it.
But
access.
it actually started even before you all. It even started with your parents' generation, where they
Sure
were
it
starting to
did.
come in and where they weren't, and it just transcended into you all, and in a sense gotten worse. I remember in my professional career, we would recruit and interview some young college grads who we couldn't get them the right job because they wanted to come in and have my job right away without having gone through the experience and the training to get there. So in my mind, as you were asking the question, I was thinking, what would I say? I would say the one thing that your generation needs to learn to do is to listen. Listen with their ears and not with their mouth. So then they can really absorb what those that are older than them have to teach. I even say, an old wino can teach you something. Because they've lived that long. There's some life experience they can share
if
with
they're
you
strung out.
that you can get educated from, one way or another. But I think the big problem right now is there's a lack of willingness to listen. Everybody has an opinion, want to say something real quick, and you can't listen while you're talking.
We're also living in the age of social media where everybody has their own platform, right?
And too many nosy people. Everybody wants to see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And for what?
True.
For what? I mean, what is it going to gain you? Oh, yeah, but so anyway.
What would you say, Karama?
Well, I think along with listening, it's important to have some line of discipline and a level of respect for people, a regard for people and their experience in life and what they can bring to the table, and not just think that they can just say, oh, well, you're just old and you don't know anything. Well, I may not know everything that's going on today, but I've got more in this computer than you have, and maybe will ever have. And so,
honestly, Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun.
That's
it didn't
right.
change that much. Like,
they didn't.
what worked for you all in some ways is
still
gonna,
works.
I mean, there's changes, right? And we have to
course.
acknowledge that, but.
Right.
I kind of smile because my auntie, when we were growing up, we would do things wrong. She said, y'all don't, you know what, we've already did that, what you're doing.
That's
so
right.
That ain't new.
We tried that already.
You may be trying a different way, but it's the exact same thing.
It's the same thing.
So how are we gonna bring that together? Like, how are we gonna?
It's a challenge.
Right.
And the reason why it's just a challenge is because there has to be a willingness to bring it together. Has to be a willingness on both sides.
Right.
Has to be a willingness on the older generation to not be frustrated with the younger generation, to bring them in and talk to them. But there has to be a willingness of the younger generation to be
To
patient
listen, like you
and
said,
listen and
right.
say, okay, let me get a hold of what you're trying to show me. I'll get, you may give me this much stuff, but there's something in there I can take out of it that's going to help me. So if there's not a willingness, it is a struggle, and it'll continue to be a struggle if there's not a willingness.
Whose job do you think it is to reach out first?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the youth need to reach out and say, help me, because I need help. But then our generation needs to say, I'm going to help you because you need help. I'm going to share with you what I can and tell you what I know so that you can get whatever I have in me and take that to use for yourself. But the younger generation also got to reach, help me. So it's got to be both sides.
It's like common sense. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy, so it's pretty
right.
reciprocal.
Yes. And I'm not denying the intellect of the young people.
Right.
I realize you all generation is some very intelligent people. You all have a lot of skills that we don't have. What we have is knowledge and experience that you don't have. And you're not going to get that until you get to our age, or
It takes time, right?
That's
it
right.
takes time. Or we help you get that experience through what we have by giving it to you. But again, if there's not a willingness, it ain't gonna happen.
And I think part of that connection is your parents, the generation between us, okay? That there has to be a connection and a regard and respect among
To your parents, and that helps connect you.
and
That's good.
right. And so if our children don't have any regard for us, you all will have no reason to have any regard for us either.
Exactly.
So it has to be a continuum.
It's to flow like that.
And the sad thing is society has gone the way of so many single parents.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's hard to be two parents, a mother and a father. With the mother, what I'm trying to say is between a mother and a father, separate individuals to raise children, that's hard in itself. To be that one person that has to be the mother and father by themselves, it's extremely difficult. So therefore, those youth aren't taught some of the respect, some of the things they need to learn, because they're just out here like, I'm doing my own thing.
Yeah. If the older people are willing and the younger people will be willing, then you think like we can make this work.
Oh yes. Because you would learn from each other.
Right.
See, in the willingness to teach, part of teaching is learning.
Right.
You all teach in school. And when you're teaching your students, but at the same time, you're learning some things from your students.
They're
So
teaching us.
it's reciprocal. So that's the same thing in this situation.
Right.
If the older are willing to teach the young at the same time, they're going to learn from you. And it's like,
Right.
I was giving you an example of Leo. But there are little things I've learned from Leo, just in my listening and interacting with him.
Right. Well, it's been so amazing to have you on the show tonight. Peyton, do you have any other questions that you wanted to ask before we wrap it up?
That was good. Please give our grandparents some love in the comments.
Please. I'm just going to tell you right now, I didn't mention this at the beginning, even though I wanted to. They have been living in Mexico. This year will be 10 years. In the summer, they work at a mission home. They run a mission home. And even though they're old, like we already said, they've
Kind
been
of old.
young at heart. I'll give you that. You're not kind of old. At 70, you're officially old.
No, I'm old at 80.
I think you keep pushing it.
I did.
When you get to 80, you're going to say
By then I'll accept it. By then I'll accept it.
They've been giving their time and their energy to try to help other young people and teenagers. They've been doing their best to bridge the gap. I'm telling you what, they've been willing. And I just want to say how much we appreciate older people like them that reach out, that are willing, that are like, hey, we're here. You just asked for help. You know what I'm saying? So we love them so much. We're so glad to have them with us. And hope you all enjoy this podcast with them. It's more valuable than you'll ever know.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
As older adults, it is not your time to fold your hands and sit down and do nothing.
Oh, no.
You have to pour yourself out and use all of your strength till the end, or you'll just die. You'll just wither up and die. And I'm not ready to do that. I'm not willing to do that. I feel like there's more for me to do.
That's right.
So
I feel like if I'm not occupied and busy doing something, I'll just roll up and die.
that's right. So, yes.
Yeah, keep on working till he comes, as the song says, right?
Right, that's right.
Well, it's been beautiful to have you all. You all know what time it is.
Wait, Grandpa Senior, do you want to say it with us?
I
He
want to
makes
try.
fun of us.
I want to try. I do. I want to try.
Every day he mocks us.
Now, how many,
already.
wait a minute, wait a minute. How I got to do
Harry.
this now? I got to peas? Oh, don't.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Ready? All right.
Peace,
love,
and hair grease.
grease.